please welcome our own very true Chamaigne Sharette.
Well, I got on my computer to look through old talks I had written, and one said, COVID and the value of community. I thought, oh, that sounds good. And I wrote it in March of 2020. And then there was another one that I wrote in October 2020 that I didn't end up giving because I can't remember exactly why, but I wasn't in a very good space. But I thought I would take a little bit of both of them as an interesting retrospective on what we've all been through. So when I first got the theme, Love Guides My Hands in Divine Right Action, which became COVID and the Value of Community. So love guides my hands in divine right action. The first thing I did was go into prayer and ask, what does love guide my hands to do? And I heard a voice, an audible voice. It said, the CDC recommends that you wash your hand with soap and water for 20 seconds. Just the TV. I thought I was having a spiritual experience, but it was just the TV. So our philosophy teaches that we are all the embodied life of God, the embodied hands of God. And it's a beautiful paradox. We seem to be separate, and yet underneath that appearance, we're one. So we have this holy hunger to more fully experience that oneness. We find infinite ways of creating in harmony together with the arts and sports and churches and businesses, family, individual relationships. And we have that craving for unity, yet our separateness and differences is what makes the whole process so rich, so heart-expanding and creative. We love our diversity, except when we don't. But even when we don't love our diversity loves us. Our diversity grows us. It stretches us and challenges us to recognize ourselves in the most unexpected faces. Every Sunday when our service host summarizes who we are as a community, she says, we work on our own individual consciousness to make the world a better place. In my view, the bottom line is that we make the world a better place by learning to love better. That is what it all boils down to. And that's what I'm going to talk about, loving well and the value of spiritual community in which we practice loving well. What I mean by loving well is doing that work on our individual consciousness so that we become less reactive and more responsive to one another, more present and patient, compassionate, more able to cooperatively create together. And that's the beginning of a better world. Centers for Spiritual Living has a global vision, a world that works for everyone. In the beginning of 2020, a lot of people were thinking about a world that works for everyone. During a global crisis, people start thinking globally. There were a lot of competing narratives about what was happening and what we should be doing, but still the whole world was thinking about the whole world. The earth was showing us our interdependence. It was a powerful moment in our history. What contributions would we make as individuals and as a spiritual community? Just like every situation in life, COVID-19 is revealing who we are. The way humanity reacts and responds lets us know what's in our consciousness. We were seeing acts of selfless service, and we're seeing scams. We were seeing teddy bears in windows so that children who can't go to the park will enjoy neighborhood walks more. And we were seeing nasty arguments on Facebook. There are all sorts of manifestations of love, fear, anger, hope, denial, mistrust, blind trust, widespread cooperation, tribalism. Everything that humanity does was showing up to the party. Not surprisingly, there were 1,000 narratives about what's true and what's not true and what's the hidden truth. These days, I said in March 2020, everyone has access to all the major platforms that disseminate information. That means the well-intentioned and the malicious, the individual and the most powerful organizations in the world can easily and convincingly promote truth claims, which we all then get to sort out for ourselves in all our spare time, right? The loftiest ideals about respecting other people's beliefs can go out the window when the stakes are high. And the stakes couldn't be higher when we're talking about a deadly illness, loss of livelihood, and severe economic disruption. How do we practice love, compassion, and respectful communication even when this kind of primal fear and anger arise in us? So I want to fast forward to what I wrote in October of 2020. I was given the talk title, Bridge Over Troubled Waters. My first thought was, gee, it's October 2020 and the presidential election is a couple weeks away. It won't be hard to write about troubled waters. After the election of 2016, 1 out of 6 people admitted to having cut off relationships with family members or close friends because of differing political views. I keep hearing that one of the most significant stresses people are dealing with right now is strain in family and household relationships over disagreements about COVID-19. Protests and politics also. It seems that the word unprecedented fits in every arena this year. Political campaigns have always included a little fear-mongering. We just can't let the other guy win. He'll vote for the wrong policies and it'll be a disaster. Well, this year, many on both sides are saying, if the other guy wins, that's the end of America. We will no longer live in a free country with democratic elections. Organized, politically motivated violence is escalating in our cities, and the corresponding rhetoric and emotional urgency is palpable in my own household. We lived with my aunt and cousin at the time. I can't help but be aware of how many people are deeply frightened about what the next several weeks will bring. I don't really want to think about it, so of course, instead of voluntarily thinking about it during the day, it keeps me up at night. I didn't sleep a wink the night after the first presidential debate. The next day, I read the topic suggestions from Home Office for this talk. Forgiveness, unconditional acceptance, setting aside injury. All I could think was, oh, I am so not in a good space to give this talk. And that probably means I especially need to give this talk. And I didn't end up actually giving it. I remember calling in sick for it a week ahead of time, but I think I was just, something happened and I just jumped on the chance. Oh, I can't do it. Oh, phew. Sorry, Linda. I think Linda covered for me. So it was interesting reading through my notes and drafts of this. I'd like to read an excerpt. After a sleepless night, I finally start crying in the wee hours of the morning. I've never been particularly patriotic, but I think right now I'm watching the fall of the United States. I'm watching the beginning of a civil war. We might never have another democratic election again. And then I think about my aunt, who is on the other side of the political spectrum. She's probably crying in her bed about the very same things, with the same acidic burning in her back from fear, the same sick feeling in her stomach. These days, after all that has happened in 2020 and the current political upheaval, I feel that surreal numbness you get when you're in the middle of a car accident, or when a doctor starts saying inappropriate things while you're half naked on his table. It happens way more than you think. Or when a friend becomes, or when a good, I'll wait. Or when a good friend becomes abusive. Or when your beloved but injured pet starts biting you repeatedly, breaking the skin, and you can't feel it, but you know, okay, this is bad. And you think, is this really happening? There must be some mistake. couldn't I just turn back time and make it so this isn't happening? I almost feel like I could, because I'm not quite in my body anyway. I'm being injured, but somehow it doesn't hurt. In fact, I'm so detached, I feel kind of good, but you just feel disoriented. And so my thinking in late 2020 went like, it's okay that at any given time, several of my friends and family members are evacuating their homes to escape fires. Isn't that always the way life has been? Since I don't know what to do and I have to keep going, this is just normal, right? Yeah, I know people that have died from COVID, haven't you? Isn't it interesting how procedures for everything we do are different? The doctor examined my throat the other day by having me open my mouth and get really close to the camera. Do you ever feel like you're in a foreign country where going to the grocery store or restaurant always has a little touch of added difficulty because you have to figure out how to pay and how to order and how to be seated and how to wait in line and how to always have a mask in your purse and how to remember always to use hand sanitizer on your way out? Someone told me there was a hurricane in Salt Lake City. Oh yeah, I heard Liberty Park doesn't have any trees anymore. Who can keep up? Moroni lost his trumpet the other day in the earthquake. I call that the day the music died. And whatever happened to those murder hornets? I used to look outside to see if I needed a sweater. Now I look outside to see what chapter of Revelation we're in. Oh yeah, remember when we used to touch our own faces? Sometimes I forget and I rub my eyes and I think, oh, where have my hands been? Oh, I think I just increased my probability of death. Oh well, death isn't the worst thing that can happen to a person. I'm not afraid of death anyway. Oh yeah, remember hugs? Isn't that strange when you really think about it? Like we open our arms and then like take somebody else and smash them against ourselves, and then if they want to let go before you do, they kind of pat you 3 times on the back and then, all right. I heard the news that we only had 3 shootings this week. And most of the protests are peaceful and don't have rioters looting and destroying buildings and killing people in the streets. That puts me in a good mood today. It's a good day. Oh yeah, it wasn't hard to write about troubled waters in October of 2020. But I was supposed to be writing about bridges over troubled waters. What's the bridge? I asked myself. Me and my politically opposite aunt are both crying in our beds. Maybe that's the bridge. We both want democracy. We both want peace. We both want safety. We never thought we'd see times like these. That's the bridge. Can't we talk heart to heart as individuals? For this talk in October 2020, I thought about collecting beautiful words about forgiveness and building bridges with our perceived enemies. And then part of me said, oh, those flowery words about building bridges don't apply to what's going on now, not this. But then I immediately realized that those flowery words from great spiritual teachers were probably all addressed to people who said, surely you don't mean to suggest that I make peace with them. Look what's going on. There are reasons. There are things. What about the things? But what are spiritual teachers and practices for, if not to guide and inspire us to be our best selves, especially during the hardest times? Jesus said, do good to those that hate you. Pray for those that despitefully use you. I hear those words and think, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to do if anyone ever despitefully uses me, because I'm just that kind of person. But then the other day, a bookmark literally fell onto my feet with those words, right when I was in the middle of being angry over being despitefully used. And I was like, oh man, okay. Psychologist Marsha Lanahan teaches that if you're angry, first you check to see if the anger is signaling something important. Maybe it's an invitation to set a new boundary that you hadn't considered. But then, after the usefulness of the anger has been addressed, sometimes you struggle with continuing feelings of anger that seem to escalate and self-perpetuate, like a snowball rolling downhill. The way to make angry feelings become less is to unwind that snowball. You put it in reverse by doing something that's the opposite of what you feel like doing. Instead of lashing out to hurt someone back, you do something kind. Even if all that's appropriate is to think kind thoughts and wish them well. In other words, do good to those that hate you. Pray for those that despitefully use you. There are a ton of beautiful stories and talks and quotes about forgiving, and I'm sure you've heard them. But what do you do when you're not just hurt, you're afraid? Afraid of what's going to happen next, afraid for national and global events that you can't control. Love and forgiveness are not the same as trust. You can forgive and still call the police. You can love and still defend yourself. You can know we are one and still set boundaries that prevent people who harm you from being part of your life. What would it look like to move through these times, our current events, with peace and grace, bringing more love into the situation? How do we embody and express our most cherished values and ideals, kindness, love, oneness, and our conviction that prayer works? What does it mean to practice science of mind in this situation? Here are my thoughts. Instead of getting sucked all the way into the bad dream, I can remember that the possibility exists that it could turn out to be all right. I can recognize that for any type of healing to occur, the illness must be brought into the light and recognized. I can use my creative influence through prayer to claim all the good I can imagine. Everything that is created spiritually before it demonstrates in form. When good comes out of the situation, it will be because someone dared to imagine it to be possible and dared to claim it and create it. I can be a guardian of the good. I can look for it, point it out, celebrate it, and create more of it. So I want to move back to the beginning of 2020, where my words of optimism then might mean even more now that we've been through the last couple of years. In that talk, I read some excerpts from a letter that Rick's mother wrote in World War II. It was describing her life as a 6-year-old in Detroit, Michigan. And I was struck by how different and yet how similar our times were, because they were extraordinary times. I'll just read a tiny bit. She said, "My dad volunteered to be an air raid warden for our block. He had to make sure that everyone in the neighborhood knew that when the air raid sirens sounded, we had to turn off all our lights and hide in the basement. I worried every time I saw or heard an airplane. Lots of things were rationed by the government: meat, sugar, coal, chocolate, silk, leather. All these things were needed for the war. The radio was always tuned to the news in the evenings. As the war progressed, I learned a new word: propaganda. Dad said, those ideas we hear sometimes are not entirely true. I asked him why some people said they hated the Germans and the Japanese. He said, those people in those countries, they're like us. They don't like to fight. They did not cause the war. The leaders right now in those countries, they're powerful and not very wise, not very nice, I mean. We don't like what they're doing, but we don't have to hate them. We don't like what they're doing, but we don't have to hate them." So if we fast forward to the present day and bring that statement with us, we don't like what they're doing, Who comes to mind? Someone who has treated you with cruelty? People whose beliefs about COVID-19 seem dangerous to you? People who promote propaganda? And since I wrote this, there are other people that might come to mind. Given recent events in the news, I imagine much more serious scenarios are coming to some of your minds. That's what I wrote then, because I gave this talk the Sunday after George Floyd was killed. Just my luck to be preparing a sermon about practicing love and compassion no matter what, and have events happen in response to which anger is not only justified but useful. In these kinds of situations, action is needed, not just sitting at home chanting Om and declaring love and compassion for all. This brings up a complex but important point. Anger and love are not mutually exclusive. Consequences and love are certainly not mutually exclusive. I'd like to share with you some insights from Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron. And these excerpts and paraphrases were from a recording called Don't Bite the Hook. It was a live gathering shortly after 9/11. It wasn't in response to 9/11, but it was a commentary on an ancient Buddhist text. But it's just interesting that these words were spoken in another very hard time, and the audience had 9/11 on their mind when they were hearing this. And a little bit of this I spoke last week, but Linda said last week that if I would just read that every week, it would be great. So I'll just read it, but it's more. When pain comes in our life, it is the moment of truth. It can wake us up or put us to sleep. It can make us more compassionate and wise, or it can make us more afraid, which makes the chance of escalating aggression and violence much greater. These teachings are instruction on how to work with your own mind. This is instruction on tolerance, and tolerance begins with oneself. The basic instruction is to sit with the restlessness of the energy of your unpleasant emotions and not feed that energy with your thoughts by creating stories that justify and add fuel to those emotions. We're finding ourselves in a situation where many, many people are more vulnerable and the situation is much more volatile. This teaching is about a kind of revolutionary patience, which can transform you at the core. It might be that in the years to come, you might look back on your practice and think, because I've been using this teaching every day of my life in difficult situations in everyday life, it has made it possible for me to sit with this very difficult situation and feel kinship with all human beings, rather than buy into polarization. These practices can transform you at the core. Instead of your heart becoming hard, it becomes tender. Instead of your mind becoming like a rock, it becomes more flexible, adaptable, free of bias, free of being locked into the notion of friend and foe, for me and against me. And I do believe this is the kind of teaching we're needing badly at this time. There's always going to be things arising in your life that are difficult. There will be unjust things, cruelty and violence, extreme self-interest. One thing you can say to yourself is, how did people get like that? Do I want to get like that too by how I'm reacting to what they're doing? Work with your side of the equation. The things that provoke you will become less. We're simple-minded when we get provoked. We feel angry toward people. We don't think of the complex causes and conditions, how it came to be. We have well-established strategies we use to try not to feel unpleasant things, but we have to ask ourselves, do they really work? At a gut level, we still feel like if we take the drink or say the mean word or vilify and dehumanize the person in our mind, it will make us feel better. But has it ever? It takes a lot of straight talk and loving kindness and patience with yourself to stay there. Practice sitting with the restless energy and just regard that discomfort as cleaning the wound, like those things that make it sting more, but you're happy to do it because you know that it will cause it to heal. The discomfort will pass. You can count on it. Pain creates pain, and patience creates patience. When this insight becomes real in your experience, you become very interested in not doing things that will bring more pain into your life. You don't want to sow seeds of suffering for your future. When we work with our own reactivity instead of blaming the outer circumstances, we bring our mind back to its natural state of flexibility, openness, and curiosity. If there is harm being done, we see it clearly. Then we can speak and act in a way that is much more apt to achieve good results. We work on ourselves so that we can be effective instruments of peace, bringing down barriers between people. So when I wrote this talk, it had been 12 weeks since our community had gathered in person. And I was pondering what it means to be a spiritual community. What's the value and purpose of community? In my mind, it's three things. A spiritual community is a place to learn spiritual principles and practices, to practice what we're learning together, to make a spiritual tradition available for others to discover. Whenever the universe closes a door, it opens a window, right? So we started live streaming because of COVID-19, and we were increasing our production quality every week, and we still are because Raj is relentless. He's a maniac. We were having people watch our live streams from far away. And I predicted we'll continue to live stream when we're meeting in person again. And we are. Fellowship in a spiritual community goes beyond general encouragement and companionship. It's truly soul-nourishing to be with people who are oriented toward the same ideals, especially when it comes to foundational things like concepts about what life is all about and what's possible. With these friends, we can pray together, talk about spiritual tools to make the most out of whatever's happening, and stay aware of how our beliefs, thoughts, and intentions influence what happens next. I was going to tell my story of, I will tell my story, it's only a paragraph or two. Forgive me if I'm running long. My skills as an impromptu speaker aren't quite there yet where I can create an exactly right timed amount of talk. So being with people who share the same worldview and ideals is something that I don't take for granted. I spent a couple of years living in a circumstance where I didn't interact with anyone whose worldview was affirming of mine, at least not in my perception at the time. I sank into depression and indulged in some black and white thinking and broad assumptions, which always makes things worse, of course. But the way I described my experience when I was in that frame of mind was that I never even lay eyeballs on another person who doesn't think that I'm lost, who doesn't think I think I said that right. I never even lay eyeballs on another human being who doesn't think I'm lost. It was a surreal feeling. One day I decided enough is enough. I'm going to find my people. I went online to look for a center for spiritual living, and I found one in Draper called the Oneness Spiritual Center for Spiritual Living, and I was so happy I cried. I mustered all my resources and found a way to get there, and divine order showed up for me big time that day. My very first Sunday at Oneness Center, it was Nicole's church, Reverend Nicole, the spiritual leader for the whole international organization was visiting. That was Kathy Hearn at the time. And that meant there was extra visiting time after service, and people who didn't normally attend made the drive to show up. And some of them turned out to be neighbors of mine who I never would have met if I hadn't come that Sunday. And one of those was Reverend Elizabeth, who we had a discussion group in Orem with for years after that. And best of all, for the special occasion, Al Goldman wore his best purple cape. And I thought, oh yeah, I found my people. He and I became best friends. And then he brought me to an event at Salt Lake Center here. And there I met Rick, and I later married him. So the presence of Centers for Spiritual Living in Salt Lake changed my life completely. It's valuable that we're here. When I'm going through a hard time and I muster all my courage and mental discipline to shift into a positive space and choose to believe that better possibilities exist for me, it makes a world of difference to have a friend who gets that and joins me in actively holding a space in consciousness for my greater yet to be. What we have here is precious. So the call to action today is the same as it was in early 2020. And that's just to keep in touch with your friends from the center and keep bringing the light to our community, to our wider community. And consider taking the time to reach out to those you know less well. Realize the blessing you can be. Don't be shy about sharing the thoughts and tools that keep you grounded through stressful times. Our philosophy has a lot to offer that is valuable for helping people move through this time with more hope and ease. When people seem hard to love, remember to use that as a sacred opportunity to do deeper work, expanding your capacity to love and be present with others and yourself. And as always, remember that what you put your attention on grows. So focus on the beauty in those you find hard to love, and love will start to grow. Focus on the beauty happening in the world, and the frightening stuff won't fill your whole field of perception. Focus on the beauty in what we have as a community, and I believe what will grow are opportunities to give and receive support for showing up as our best selves. Our world would love to have you and me show up as our best selves right about now. Let's help each other keep doing that. And now let's move into prayer. Here at Salt Lake Center for Spiritual Living, we practice affirmative prayer, speaking what's already true in our own awareness. We work on our individual consciousness, so I'll speak in the first person, and I invite you to hear my words as your own words, if they resonate for you. I begin by taking a deep breath and reminding myself that there is only one thing going on here: God, the omnipresent, intelligent life that is living itself as you and as me and as our whole planet, our whole universe. One life, one love, one infinite presence. I am fully and completely one with this infinite presence. I am made of nothing but God stuff. Therefore, all qualities of the divine find expression through me. One of these qualities of divine is order. When difficult things are happening, I trust that divine order is working all things together for good. I amplify this good by actively looking for it and celebrating it. I amplify this good even further by participating as an active co-creator. As divine order expresses through me and as me, I am an instrument of that process. I joyfully look for and find ways to work all things together for good. In the paradox between divine order and free will, it's not me over here with the free will and God over there doing divine order. There's just one thing happening here: volition weaving into perfection. Love itself is inviting me to participate in a beautiful unfolding. My mind is attuned to notice every opportunity to create beauty. Love guides my hands in divine right action. Love guides my volition in divine right action. As I open, attune, and expand my heart, I live from that place where my choices are love choosing through me. For this recognition, I am grateful and at peace, knowing that it is already done. Together say with me, and so it is.